delighted to say that we're joined by Sam Tabuteau from the Hounslow Herald. He follows Brentford far and wide across the country, and he knows Thomas Frank better than any of us, perhaps less well than we're going to get to know him. But Sam, thank you very much for coming on. We've had you on before. What are we getting with Thomas Frank as a manager, as a person?
I think that's kind of sums it up. It's as a person rather than a manager. I think we could go and talk tactically about him for, till the cows come home. But ultimately, it's all about him as a person, as a character. This guy is, deeply empathetic, loves improving players, and loves sort of building a culture around a tight knit squad that all work hard for each other. And ultimately, the main thing he always comes back to is the no dickheads policy. Um, Now you'll know the Spurs squad better than mine, better than I do, but ultimately that is something that he'll want to instill. He'll want players who are going to work selflessly for the team. They're not going to bring egos to the table because ultimately nothing can be achieved without hard work.
So that's kind of almost off the pitch in a way. What are
Mm.
we getting on the pitch then, from a sort of tactical point of view? How does he set up? I mean, we'll have obviously seen the way that he likes to play. But one thing I've noticed from following Brentford is he is quite adaptable. He has he has at least two systems that he'll set up with.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, adaptable's the right word, and that's probably in direct contrast to someone like Ange Postecoglou, for example. So yeah, expect something a little bit different. With Brentford, he's operating with one of the lowest wage budgets in the league. So at that point, he wants to play on the fine margins. He has to find that edge somewhere. And he's found that edge through one being adaptable, two looking at, say, set pieces. The kickoffs were a big thing last season. Um, and it's the idea that yeah, where can teams find the edge? That's the main thing that he always looks for.
And in terms of the actual setup, most of the time it's a sort of, is it 4-3-3? Would that be right?
Yeah, so it's a 4-3-3 that this season, with the growth of Mikkel Damsgaard, has sort of moved more towards a 4-2-3-1. Um, and he's also at times relied upon a 3-5-2 if he feels that, he's coming up against stronger opposition, a slightly more defensively solid system. But ultimately, 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3, that is where that's what he wants to play.
Yeah, it's not too dissimilar in terms of the way I guess that Ange played. It's not like kind of jumping from into an Oliver Glasner, say that it might have been. What can you tell us about his coaching staff then?
Yeah, so his coaching staff, as I think it's been quite widely reported, he wants to take quite a few of them with him. Justin Cochrane is one that Spurs fans might know. He was obviously with the club through the youth teams. He's very highly rated, working with England as well. I think if Tottenham can get him across, that's quite a big coup. Keith Andrews, set piece coach, bought in last season. He's added layers. He worked on the kickoff stuff. He worked with throw-ins. He's got quite a good grounding within the game. Obviously, Brentford, they sort of pride themselves on set pieces and being able to take advantage of those. So he's done quite a good job in that regard. Klaus Norgard is someone that knows Thomas Frank probably better than anyone else. He was where most of the hirings are done by the club. Klaus Norgard was someone that that Thomas Frank, sorry, looked at and said, "I want to bring him with me." Um, so those are the main ones. I think he's also looking at the goalkeeper coach. Um, so yeah, he wants to bring a lot of familiarity with him from Brentford.
So I really like Thomas Frank. I've interviewed him at press conferences a lot. Obviously, you've got to love the way that he's gone about things at Brentford. Not even barely a sniff of getting in relegation issues in the 4 seasons they've been in the Premier League. Personally, the one thing that I'm going to be interested to see quite early is how do you think he's going to deal with playing in the Champions League and uh, the Premier League? So that sort of twice a week. I know he did it in the Championship, but how do you think for somebody that maybe obviously hasn't experienced that, that could pan out?
I think that's one of the questions that will be over his head is how can he deal with it? Because there's no sort of evidence to suggest he's never done it before. So it's a complete unknown. But I ultimately think that he is, he's a manager who's so adaptable that ultimately he can flex to different problems and he's not rigid, he's not stuck in his way of thinking. If he feels that the schedule's getting on top of the squad a little bit, he will rework things. He's not wedded to one way of playing or uh, you know, one way of using his squad. So I think that adaptability will really, really come into play.
You've obviously followed Brentford a lot, and you'll have been at press conferences a lot where he's been asked about his future. Firstly, did you always know that this day would come, that he would leave? And secondly, do you think he certainly wasn't looking for it, but do you think, it was always at the back of his mind at some point?
I think it was always at the back of his mind, but the back of his mind is exactly where it stayed. Because whenever he was talking about his future, it was never a surefire thing that he was, ever thinking about leaving. I think he's always said that he's ambitious, but ultimately, if those ambitions didn't suit the projects that he was being presented with, then he wasn't going to take it. He's turned down several jobs in the past. He's heavily linked with Chelsea, heavily linked with Man United, heavily linked with Aston Villa as well previously. So those are all jobs that, there were probably initial negotiations or conversations, and he didn't feel that job, that project fitted what he was after. He's very sort of clear that any job that he is to take has to tie in with how he wants to live his life off the pitch. He has to be able to strike the balance between working and enjoying his sort of free time and his ability to escape football. So those are going to be big conversations. Those will have been conversations that he's had with Daniel Levy. Um, and I think if he's clearly got those assurances, and so he feels that this project is suited for him.
Are you surprised that he's chosen Tottenham maybe ahead of some of the other clubs you mentioned?
I'm not necessarily sure I am because I don't think Man United was ever a good fit for him because I don't think that he was ever going to be offered the assurances, and I think the scale of the job really didn't suit what he was after. So I never saw that as a concrete option for him. I think with Tottenham, what he's got is it's a young, battle-hardened, hungry squad. There's a lot of players there that I think he'll really enjoy sort of getting around on the training ground. I'm looking at Lucas Bergvall. I'm looking at Archie Gray. I think those are players that Archie Gray is obviously someone that was linked to Brentford. And it looked for all the world that he was going there until he went to Tottenham. So the same can also be said for Brennan Johnson. So these are all players that Frank has sort of admired in the past, and I think he'll really enjoy sort of getting time with them on the training ground. And so yeah, I think he looks at that, and he also sees. I think he will have seen the success in the Europa League, and he will have seen what success can do to that fan base, to that club. The scenes at the trophy parade. They were quite staggering, and I think he'll really enjoy being able to potentially bring more success.
The other thing that obviously Tottenham fans want to know is if there's been links recently with potentially him bringing Brian and Boomer. Now, I know it sounds, like an ideal world, doesn't it? Oh, he just bring him with him. It seems definite, almost guaranteed that Mbumo is going to go. I mean, could you see him going to Tottenham following Frank, or do you think United's still more likely?
So I think that these were reports that I certainly followed, and to my understanding, it's Mbumo is on a list that Tottenham are looking at. That list also includes Semenyo, but I also think that for Mbumo, I think he's a childhood United fan. I think his preference is United. I think he's made that clear, and it's more about whether Man United can negotiate a deal. So if they can't negotiate a deal, then Tottenham are probably there to try and strike and try and hijack. But for now, I think that one's probably off the table. Another one that was rumored is Nathan Collins, but that's dependent on quite a few things. That's dependent on Romero leaving. He's also tied to quite a long-term contract. Was signed for a club record fee only 2 seasons ago, so will be expensive to get out of Brentford. But a player that's admired by Frank.
Obviously. And just lastly, then what does it mean for Brentford? Where does it leave Brentford?
It leaves Brentford in a little bit of a period of unknown, a little bit of uncertainty, which they haven't perhaps been used to over the past couple of seasons. They come into their fifth season in the Premier League. They've got a strong squad, but they've got a squad that's full of potential, and not necessarily potential that has been sort of rewarded as yet. So you look at Fabio Carvalho and Igor Thiago, these are players who were signed for big money, didn't play quite as much as they wanted to last season. Those are players who could go on and really sort of spearhead this next generation for Brentford. But, on the other hand, that doesn't necessarily, that is no guarantee. There's no guarantee around that. There's no guarantee that the next manager that comes in looks at either of them and thinks they're for him. So I think there's quite a bit of uncertainty, definitely.
Sam, thank you very much for coming to talk to us. Brilliant insight as ever, and we'll get you on, no doubt, when we face you later on in the season. Hope you have a great rest of the summer. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot for having me on.